Brilliant. Well, we'll make a start. It doesn't look like anyone's joining us yet. I'll just start off with a little bit of housekeeping. The session is recorded. The recording is just to be put on our Knowledge Hub on the Tyfu Cymru website. Feel free to keep your camera off and let any of us know if you don't want to be on the recording, and then we can take your name out and your picture and everything. We like the session to be interactive and not too formal, so ask questions or pop them in the chat, whatever suits you. And please keep yourself on mute while others are speaking, just to minimize interference. And then we'll get started. So we've got Chris and Ben, if you want to just do a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, you want to start with me?
Lovely.
Well, yeah, my mic is on. Yeah, Chris Creed. Apologies because we had Lynn Tatnell down to help with this, but she's had to rush up to Scotland because her father's been taken ill. So you're down to me and Ben. So hopefully we'll be able to answer all the questions you want. I think we got quite a mix on here. We got 1 or 2 conventional growers and 1 or 2 organic growers, so we can all work together and get a view on controlling weeds. Okay, Ben?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name is Ben Barnes, a horticultural consultant at ADAS. Got quite a bit of experience with, with field veg, and I also do grow veg myself on about 1/4 of an acre with a 25-metre polytunnel and some no-dig beds outside. So yeah, that's me.
Right, if we can go around the group and everybody introduce themselves and just tell us what you want out of the meeting, then we'll make a start. I don't know if you can.
Would you like to start with you, Chris?
Okay.
Me? Yeah, I know it's Chris. Yeah, I'm going to say
at least 2 Chris's here. I'm Chris Hemmings from the North Coast, Colwyn Bay. I have taught horticulture in the past and worked mainly in amenity horticulture, national trust and so on. Though I've also worked, I once taught a garden centre management course and so on. So I've got that sort of nursery background. But a couple of years ago, an opportunity came up which I grasped very quickly to set going something which is now called Incredible Edible Colwyn. And we have relatively small patches in the town centre, larger patches at the town's major church, and we are just negotiating to get use of a sort of 5 hectare or so field for large-scale growing of fruit and veg. The idea is local production for local consumption, with a particular view towards feeding people most in need. So yeah, I'm just, I have got horticultural background, lots and lots of it, but specifically on larger scale growing, not so much so.
Lovely, thank you. And Nick?
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick Joseph. It says in the corner of the screen, I think there. Yeah, we're organic. We do a box scheme in South Pembrokeshire. We've got about up to 150 boxes a week going out. Not as business is quite tough at the moment. COVID was great for us. That was a while ago. Things have settled down a bit since then. We sell some wholesale as well. And whereon we grow about 10 to 12 acres of field scale a year. And we'd like to get some polytunnels as well. But weeding, because we're organic, is a massive challenge. It gets harder every year. We're getting weeds going to seed every year. And it's pretty challenging with fat hen and all the other weeds. So we've got various ways of dealing with it, but obviously being organic, we're limited on what we can do, hence the reason I'm not on this meeting today. So good to meet you all, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Ali, would you like to say a little bit?
Yeah, I'm in the Vale of Glamorgan. We're Ali's Edibles, and we provide. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Ali.
Yeah, yeah. We grow on about an acre, and we do no dig as well. And and we do try and grow organically. We're not certified, but we do try and grow on organic principles, and weeding is a problem. Although I have to confess, I find it quite meditative to weed a bed. But I would like to know some of the ideas that Ben and Chris have got. Thanks.
Brilliant. Michael?
The family run farm shops in Anglesey. We have a pick your own. We grow quite a lot of fruit and veg. And we have a kitchen for producing things for the shop and a butchery. And growing is conventional.
Lovely. Geraint, sorry, I know you've just joined us. Would you like to say anything about your business?
Hi, yes, sorry I'm late. It's Bonston Edge, so we started last year growing to organic principles. The land hasn't been used for quite a while, so we get infested with weeds. So I think this will be a useful session for us. Thank you.
Lovely, there we go, all done.
All right.
Okay. Hopefully this will work. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Can you do? Yeah, you can. Can you hide the next slide, or you just get it?
Oh, has it gone on the wrong?
It's gone on the wrong.
There's a way to swap them. I forget how you do it.
The wrong thing is slideshow. You want, don't you?
That one. Is that it?
There you go.
No, that's better. Yeah, that's good.
Okie doke. So yeah, this is about weed control and field vegetables. I'm sure, as you all aware. So quick agenda. Why control weeds? What are the issues? We'll have a bit of a discussion. A section on herbicides and sort of focusing mainly on updates and changes. Alternative weed control methods. And then a little bit of an introduction to our Operate project, which is all based on alternative weed control methods. So yeah, let's make a start. Why control weeds? So I suppose this is all pretty basic stuff. I'm sure I'm not telling anyone anything new. We obviously reduce yield. The weed seed bank in the soil makes future problems and affects rotation choices. Can give you problems at harvesting, particularly with machinery and timings. Reduce the quality of produce potentially if you're getting contamination, which isn't it might your consumers or suppliers might not be happy with. Weeds can also be a host for pests and disease. And also we need to consider what the weed type is, whether it's annual or perennial, as different control strategies may or not be relevant. So we'll start off with a bit of discussion. What are your top weed issues? I don't know who would like to go first.
Yeah, pretty much all of those, Ben, I think.
Rose Bay willow herb is our main problem.
Yeah.
It's not on there. It's definitely a problem.
Rose Bay willow herb is, well, there's 3 willow herbs, isn't there? But the one we mainly get in horticulture is the American one. But it's an absolute pest, and it's also sort of perennial or semi-perennial, and it's across fruit and veg and everything. So it's also a blown-in weed. So the weed, it's a little sail and it can travel for miles. So it's you've got to control your own weeds and stop them seeding, but you might get some weeds blown in from your neighbours. Right, anybody want to comment on it?
Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, fat hen for us and red shank, 2 of the biggest problems they have been for a long time. We grow a lot of brassicas, so we can get on top of that by just you know, once they form a canopy, we do get weed in there, but if we can control it with sort of brassicas crops. But we have problems with leeks because they just grow upright, they don't form a canopy. We're on the wrong spacing, I admit, for leeks, but we transplant everything as well, which helps. We wouldn't ever begin to think about growing leeks from seed in organically. Spring onions are the same. And we're tarping a lot as well in small areas now with sort of various transplanted stuff just to keep on top of weed. We bought a double wheel hoe last year, when the French make, I can't think of the name of it now. Excellent for small scale stuff, not very good for field scale obviously, but it's surprising how much work you can do with one of those in, you know, just if you've got someone on it all the time. And we've got a weed this year, I don't know what it is. It's like, I think it might be nightshade or something. It's got a black berry on it, and that's just spread like absolute wildfire. And maybe Chris might be able to help me out with that one.
Yeah, well, nightshade, it's a sort of modern weed really, but you know, one of the crops we do a lot of in Wales is pumpkins, and nightshade is a big issue in pumpkins because we're doing pick your own, and people obviously want to come in and the kids will eat the berries. I mean, they're not sort of drop dead poisonous, but they are enough to give you an upset stomach. So that's a bit of a problem. We have to sometimes go and pull it on farms. It's a lot of these weeds are late germinators, and you made a couple of good points there. One is fat hen is sort of a real enemy of especially organic systems, because it seems to germinate in a drought and then grow to about 1.5 meters tall in 2 weeks. So that's my experience of it. It's something to fear. And the other thing is the crop canopy. And I agree, if you're growing things like leeks, onions and spring onions, a lot of these farms don't make a canopy. A lot of these crops don't make a canopy, even if they're on sort of correct densities, and they're always going to be vulnerable to weeds. So a couple of good points there. I think with black vineweed, the main thing to remember about weeds is the smaller the weed, the easier it is to control. I know it's easy to say that, but you're better off hoeing fat hen out when it's cotyledon stage rather than when it's 1 meter tall. I don't know if you've got any comments, Ben.
Yeah, just yeah, nightshade, I suppose, is as you say, it's difficult in potato crops as well, especially if it's anyone's automated harvesting, because the seeds can you know end up in the crop if it goes to fruition. So yeah, something to be aware of in that situation. But yeah, just early weed control, I suppose, is always easier, and we'll go on in a minute to sort of, you know, as you mentioned with putting the tarp over and things, you know, that sort of stale seed bed preparation work, you know, is definitely one of the biggest things that's going to allow your crop to get away. And if, as you're saying, if you're putting in things in modules, then you're helping them to get away a lot better. So, you know, those are definitely two key strategies, but we will cover some others.
Yeah.
Any other comments from anybody, Ali, and them for?
Yeah, I could make just one brief comment. As I said earlier, we are just negotiating to get a field. So from the group's point of view, it's all very new, and we haven't actually recognised the weed problems that will doubtless emerge. But when I was first shown the field, I was impressed but slightly taken aback at the same time, because it's got a lot of shrubs growing on it, sort of small sub-shrubs, sort of 0.5 meter to 1 meter. And I said, sort of resolutely, I said, okay, well, you know, we can start clearing that as soon as we get given permission, get the go-ahead. And the guy just threw his arms up and said, no, it's not a problem. We'll clear it all, because it's through the county council and the county council gardening department. It was going to be a job for them just to clear it off. So I'm thinking there will there will be quite a lot of shrubs wanting to regrow in the soil and so on. So I imagine you can talk about that when we come to describing like mulching and mulch mats and so on. But that's likely to be our major problem, is just like regrowth of shrubs.
Yeah, okay, we'll be on that one then. Michael, have you got any comments?
I think it's a broad list of weeds which you get some years and you don't get others. I concur with your thoughts of trying to get rid of small weeds rather than big ones, and starting off with clean ground, or if possible stale seed bed, can help a lot with some of these problems.
I think one thing you're doing is doing a sort of overwintered stale seed bed, and then not cultivating it again in the spring, so you don't bring up fresh weed seeds, as long as your soil structure's in good nick.
That is true. Only cultivating a narrow strip where we hope to plant something, rather than cultivating the whole bed. A quick whiff of Roundup before you plant or drill does help enormously to keep other weeds down.
Yeah, and for the organic folks, I mean, you know, hopefully we'll come on to some cover, and cover crops are quite interesting as well, but it's just a case of how you burn them off. But we'll come on to that a bit later on. Anybody else want to share it? Geraint, have you got any real issues with weed? I know you're a fairly new grower.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of docks as well, which are really stubborn to get out. We have also in the first year, we found that the onions were suffering a lot because the rabbits were taking the tops off, and that meant then that the weeds were just gathering around the onion patches. So we've Wonder Mesh has helped with that, because it's kept the rabbits out and allowed the plants to flourish. So and then it creates a cover to keep the weeds out. So we're looking to do a lot more of that this year, and also using MyPex as well. We've bought a load in to lower the maintenance, really, because it was a tough year with weeding last year.
Yeah, I see Gerald's joined us from down St David's Way. How good to hear from you again, Gerald. Can you just introduce yourself?
Sorry, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. No, I'm Gerald Miles, a organic farmer in Pembrokeshire on the coast, and we've got a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, and that's primarily why I'm here, because I've had a good experience of, we're good at growing weeds, except they grow in the wrong place.
And you're also, you've got a fair bit of protected crop in there, Gerald, as well, tunnels and stuff.
Yeah, we've only got 2. We're going to build another one this year. We've got 5 acres field that we grow the vegetables. It's seasonal. It depends how good we are on top of the weeds. On our first years, we found it very difficult. Like onions, you were saying earlier on, what we ended up covering the bed with plastic and making holes and planting the onion sets in, which was successful.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Getting on your knees and weeding them for days.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's a good one. Well, thanks for that, Gerald. Yeah, like I say, good to hear from you again.
Thank you.
We had a good project down there, didn't we, with composting manures?
Oh yes.
It's all coming back.
I remember your voice now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Ben, can we have the next one, please, mate?
So yeah, so the first thing to talk about is the herbicide side of things. So these are the sort of 6 most commonly used herbicides in field vegetables. Although actually I think there's more than 6 on there looking at it now. So yeah, just to sort of yeah, give you a bit of a flavour. So and a bit of a background really, if we're looking at the overall use of pesticides, both in terms of the area treated and the weight applied, obviously herbicide, well not obviously, but as you can see in the graphs here, herbicides do make up the predominant portion of all chemical applied to crops. So, you know, it's a big part of any crop protection plan. So it's, yeah, it's pretty significant, and as we'll go through in the other sections, you know, used in combination with other techniques, you can obviously greatly reduce it, or for the organic people, you know, find other ways around it. So yeah, just a bit of sort of background. There's essentially 3 places that you can target your weeds at. You can target them, and this is equally, you know, valuable for organic and conventional. Your pre-planting, so we're talking either your pre-emergent sprays or your sort of putting down a Mypex mulch or something like that, or anything to create a stale seed bed. Pre-emergence, so yeah, so essentially essentially more or less the same as pre-planting really. So that's something that's going to be in the soil, and then any sort of essentially puts like a film across the top of your soil, which you need a very well fine consolidated sort of seed bed, so that as those initial things come up, initial weeds come up when they're very young, they're going to get a dose, and that's going to knock them back. And then post-emergence, which again has to be done well, they're small, because you know you can't really you end up having to put such large rates on that you'll probably end up having problems with your crop. So yeah, so as you can see, there's the sort of the 4 stages of where we can, you know, so it's an ongoing cycle really. This has all kind of been discussed before, but you know, killing your weed seedlings, you're stopping the seed setting, preventing the weeds or the seeds from returning to the soil, and then if you can manage to do that consistently through enough you know, growing cycles, you'll eventually deplete the seed bank.
What about using modules then, Ben, instead of direct sowing? Because obviously if you direct sow, the weeds come up equally with the seed, but if you can put a module in, you might get a month or 5 weeks start on the weed. Definitely.
Well, and like was said with you know, with onions and with leeks, yeah, definitely it gets it up above, you know, it's you know, it's sometimes inches above, you know, where it would be, you know, in terms of height, you know, to start shading out, and also yeah, I mean, if you're growing something in modules, a plant can be, you know, as a minimum in the middle of the summer, a lot of plants will be sort of 6, sometimes 8 weeks old. So you've effectively, yeah, got that head start, as you say, Chris, on
I think the only crops that I've not seen done from modules are pretty much carrot and parsnip. I think pretty much most of the others you can do something with a module.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
That's exactly what we do, Chris. Yeah.
So you just drill carrots and parsnips, do you?
Pretty much. That's all we do from seed these days. Yeah.
Yeah, I do beetroot as well. That works quite well.
Yeah, beetroot's good in the module.
Yeah, beetroot. I do early transplanted beetroot, so I can get, you know, I'll be starting beetroot now inside. But yeah, you know, I don't direct drill that until the soil's warmed up a little bit. You know, April, May is quite a good time.
I think some quite key timings as well, because a lot of these weeds germinate in March, and then they, you know, you can get a guide from the OAHDB, and I think they've still got a lot of their technical material available online, but they do a good weed guide, and it gives you the periods when weeds germinate, and you know, one of the groups of weeds we put up on the previous slide was the polygonum group, red shank, black bindweed, and knotgrass, and those sort of germinate all more or less all at the same time. So they seem to germinate like all on one day in March. So if you can beat them and then not disturb the ground again, as with these sort of minimum cultivation techniques, then you're a long way. You need to know your weed biology in your families, really, whether you're conventional or organic.
And you do even have options, well, for the two that you mentioned, the onions and the carrots, not so much for the onions, but with the carrots, you can potentially sow them pretty thick and then start pulling out, young bunched carrots earlier on. So you end up with a bit of extra sort of canopy cover. And then as you sort of, they reduce as you're pulling out the young ones, then you end up with something like the spacing that you would have had if you just planted main crop.
Yeah, I've seen some good practice on no dig where you can put on a decent layer of either composted manure of your own, or get hold of some PAS 100 green waste and put a decent layer on, and that itself will produce a sort of weed-free mulch that you can drill. And then obviously the ones that you drill first into that system would be your carrots and your parsnips. And then they should come up, if it's well composted, they should come up with no weed for maybe a month before the blown-in weeds take over.
My experience with that kind of system, it's irrigation has been key. As you say, it's got to be, if it's really well composted, it should hold a bit more moisture. But generally, particularly in a dry spring, because that kind of organic material will often dry out quite quickly. So something like a drip irrigation line or what have you can be key to getting that seed to germinate.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can bring some horrific weeds in with uncomposted manures, things like docks and perennial nettle, couch grass from seed. All those sort of weeds can come in from uncomposted manure. So it's a bit like the system me and Gerald worked on, that if you can get it up to 50-60 degrees C and then keep turning it, you'll end up with a much better product and keep it covered, so that A, you don't lose all your nutrient, and B, weeds don't blow onto the actual stack.
We're kind of going towards we're going to be going towards no dig in a certain we're going to be trying that sort of thing. It all depends what you're growing, doesn't it, really? Like certain brassicas will tolerate some weed and they'll grow above the weed, they'll cope quite favorably with weed, but then certain things need much narrower spacings and stuff. So you need a combination of field scale, open ground, and no dig as well. I would say that's where we're trying to get to, and polytunnels as well.
I think it's somebody's mentioned it already, but the actual canopy that you achieve, I mean, you can get a good canopy with some of the more vigorous brassicas like Brussels and cabbage and collie and that, and if you can beat the weed for say 3 weeks, probably the crop will give you enough cover to control the weeds, especially if game was mentioned before, if you're growing things at the correct densities, which A gives you less to hoe, and B gives you more coverage and high yield per hectare of what you're actually cultivating. So all these vegetable plants will have an optimal density that you can usually find out in seed catalogues or through Tovey, and it's silly to grow your onions at 10 to the metre when you can grow 50 and that sort of thing, and get the same yield.
So just to finish off on the chemical weed control. So for those of you who may not know, EMU is an emergency authorization for minor use. So basically what that means is that they've applied for off-label uses of these chemicals. So essentially the main thing to be aware of there is that essentially the manufacturer isn't accepting any liability for the use of that chemical, because that it hasn't been tested, it's not on the label. But as you can kind of see here, There are different chemicals do target different weeds, but not all of these things will be on, have emus on potentially all the different veg. So, it is worth checking these things out. You can check directly through the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive. They have what's called the Chemical Regulations Division website, so you can check things there, or you can just read the product labels. And although won't necessarily be on a product label for emus.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing for conventional growers is that a lot of these herbicides can be used on a huge range of crops, both on and off label. So things like pendimethalin, for example, can be used on most vegetable crops, as far as I know, apart from beets. And you can then, if you've got a really complicated mixed farm system, you can reduce the amount of pesticides you've got in your cupboard, so you don't just buy things that control weeds in one crop.
And some sort of idea in terms of some things are going to be more mainly residual activity. So you've got a couple of examples there of things that you'd sort of use more typically as pre-emergence, and obviously moisture is a big factor in sort of creating that sheen in which when the new weed seeds come through. And you also need to be aware of the risk of movement within the root zone during, particularly heavy rain, or if you're going to be having a lot of irrigation. Obviously, that layer can kind of come down, and there's a potential problems with your crop. And then there's a couple of examples here with contact activity. They do tend to work better on smaller weeds, generally a bit better in sort of warm, sunnier conditions. An exposed crop leaves sort of need to be, if they're too waxy, you're not going to get that penetration, and obviously you need to be wary of the sort of stewardship in terms of distances, the lee wraps and what have you, distances against water courses. But don't know if the conventional growers we have on want to say anything about this in general.
Any comment, Michael?
Well, generally you try and pick the herbicide which is going to cover the problem that you've got there. Sometimes it's complicated, but I think we've still got just enough chemicals to control most of the weeds that we get.
Yeah, I think it's a case of knowing your weeds and knowing your herbicides and knowing your crop, isn't it? It's the three big pillars of knowledge you need really to get good weed control.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff is coming up for review in 2024. So, I suppose it's anyone's guess at this stage, and with a bit of the sort of staffing problems that they are getting over at CRD at the minute. I've employed a few more people, but it's there is still a bit of a logjam there. So it'll be interesting to see how things develop in the next sort of 2 years. So I think that's pretty much everything on chemical control. Unless anyone else has anything else to say.
I'll make one comment that if the soil type will allow early cultivations ready for drilling or planting to try and get a stale seed bed, that is a very good start. And then you can round up before you plant, and you may not need very much more chemical to keep the crop clean. But that early cultivations in preparedness of planting, we try and do as much as we can. Not all soil types will do it. Some soil types will cap and you have a nightmare, but where you can, it's worth a go.
Yeah, fair comment. stale seedbeds are a very good technique in both conventional and unorganic type systems.
Yeah. No.
So, sorry,
No.
just out of interest, does anyone know? We have major problems with carrots being organic here. They're probably the hardest thing to grow organically, I would say, one of them. And to the point where we just buy them in really quite often, and just it's a lot less work and it actually saves money. But I just wondered if anyone knows of any chemicals you can use for carrot fly in an organic system. Basically, that would be, if I could find something, then please tell me.
Well, the only way you'll keep carrot fly out of organic systems is to use some sort of
Wonder mesh.
Wonder mesh is good, yeah, because wonder mesh is fine enough to keep the bigger pests like carrot flies out, as long as you get it on. You know, it's amazing how quick they get into them. So they're almost just past cotyledon stage, and the flies can be in them laying eggs. So
I
Okay,
cover
they
the
understood.
day I sow the seed. The day I drill the seed,
Yeah.
carrots in the organic system, I cover with environmental wonder mesh or whatever mesh I've got, and
yeah,
then that works, and I've not had a problem with carrot fly. So
Are you talking about a fairly small area of carrots here though? Like we're growing field scale, so like the mesh is something that I haven't really looked at, but
well, in conventional ground we've got nothing to control cabbage root fly in Swedes. So you'll see all the conventional growers growing Swedes will be netting them with something like wonder mesh, and they always put a new mesh on every year, because if they get a hole in it, they get carrot fly in, and their systems of getting Swedes into supermarkets is so tightly spec'd that if they get any carrot fly, they've got to go through every single Swede and make sure there's not a tunnel on it. So that's why they have it with no holes in. But I mean, if you're doing it for organic, you might just get 1% carrot fly with the holes in the mesh, but the 99% will be controlled.
Yeah, I got some mesh half price. That had
You will do. You can buy it.
But it was absolutely perfect
good.
what I did, and it was really good value, Nick. So
yeah, it's a good system.
So obviously you don't have because like if you mesh, then you've got problems weeding, then haven't you? So how do you get over that one?
What they normally do is sorry, Ali, keep going.
It's on a no dig system. I weed it
brilliant,
thoroughly beforehand, before I sow them. Drill the carrots or the parsnip. Well, don't cover parsnips, but cover carrots, and then put the hoops up, and
so you're going straight onto you're going straight onto compost with a 6-row seeder or something?
No, I do it all manually, but yeah, you could use a 6-row seeder, and then cover it. But as I say, this mesh that I got, we haven't used it all actually, but I got a huge amount, and it was really not very expensive. Well,
where did you get it from? Just
I can't remember. Chris told me the people to go to, so he might be able to tell you. I think
if you go direct to Wonder Mesh, they sort of buy back off the growers that need the new sheets, and I mean these are big sheets. They're 12 meter usually, and you can handle them on a sort of per. If you're not, I mean, they'll be doing 400 hectares of Swede under nets, especially in Scotland. But on a more normal production system, say you've got 2 acres of carrots, then you can have several sheets, and you can shovel soil on them. They tend to plough them in because they're there for the life of the crop. But you can put spadefuls of soil on to stop it blowing off, and then when you want to weed it, just shake the soil off, peel the thing off, weed them as quick as you can so the fly doesn't get in, and then back on. Happy days.
What I think we're going to have to go to no dig with carrots would be a very sensible approach to it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's good, and it puts a big amount of organic matter in, which is good for your rotation and whatever crop you're following. Because I mean, carrots, the fly comes from the previous crop, so I mean, they say if you can get half a mile away, which isn't really practical on a smaller holding, but you don't want to be leaving crops having weed seed into them, and B, sort of bleeding out pests in large numbers for a long time. So, you know, if your crop's finished, get rid of it.
Yeah. And what variety of carrots are you growing, Ali? Do you have a particular favourite one, or do you grow several varieties?
That's a good question. I just ordered them. I always get fresh carrot seed. I don't ever use last year's carrot seed. And
good advice there.
And and I really like the Nance 2, Nance 5 group of carrots, because you can sow them at any time really and have them all year round. But I also supply to a restaurant who's a bit particular about his carrots, so I've got some special ones for him. So they're going a separate place, but with a net. But to be honest, the net we put on the carrots this year did have holes in it, but they didn't get it in. The carrot flies didn't get in.
Well, they don't. They just, you know, they're perfectly acceptable. They seem to they're sort of critters that are easily deterred. I always find.
Yeah, I think we got about 200 meters of 4 meter wide mesh for about 90 quid.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that'll last you 10 years as well.
Yeah, and it will last you 10 years. So yeah.
What's it called? Wonder mesh?
I don't know. Oh,
well, there's Wonder Mesh and Enviromesh, but I think the Wonder Mesh is a bit more robust.
Yeah, I think it was Enviromesh we got, but yeah, I highly recommend it. Keeps the rabbits out too.
Keeps rabbits off, deer, pigeons, everything pretty much. And the other thing, it acts a bit like a sort of mini cloche because it keeps the wind off and preserves soil structure from rain, and also acts like a mini greenhouse. It keeps some, you know, keep 2 degrees of frost off.
I think drilling carrots into ridges is an advantage for trying to keep the weed down too.
We do that. We do that all the time. Yeah, that is. I wouldn't
cultivate rather than spray.
Yeah.
Because I mean, conventional carrot growing, they're doing 5 rows of 5 group rows of carrots, so it's 15 rows on a 1.5 meter bed, and they get 15 rows, and it's sort of absolutely precisely drilled so all the carrots get to the same size. So you've got to have some pretty good kit to do that. And like Ali says, fresh seed. Don't ever keep carrot seed. Even, you know, I mean, most seed you can keep in a fridge for a year, but not carrot or parsnip.
Okay,
right.
So yeah, it sounds, you know, we've talked through a lot of this slide really, but in summary, prevention is better than cure. You know,
that's a bit of no dig in the picture, is it, Ben?
Well, actually it is, yeah, but the point it's trying to illustrate is the stale seed bed actually. So you can, you know, cover it with, you know, with various ground coverings before, and then removing it later. So you can see there's a bit of dieback there on whatever was sort of in the paths. Or below, you know, you can use chemical, you can use a Roundup that's been mentioned, you can hoe as, you know, as shown there below. People obviously do in organic systems use gas. Obviously that's pretty expensive these days, so probably not necessarily the best option, but that is there. And as has already been said, if you can get it clean enough in that stale bed seed bed, then you don't really need potentially a lot of following up with herbicides or hoeing, or, you know, however you're, you know, controlling the weeds later. So yeah, it's definitely, prevention is better than cure.
Yeah, I did see an organic ridge hoeing machine. Well, it was a brush actually. It actually brushes the weed off the side of a ridge, and then it sort of brushes the ridge down, and then you come back the other way and brush it back up again. And that was, you know, that was working really well on carrots and Swedes and stuff. That was on an organic farm in Wales. What's that contraption at the bottom then, Ben, on the bottom picture? Is that a sort of springtime cultivator or something?
So they call it a roller crimper.
Roller crimper.
Yeah, so the idea is it sort of breaks the stem of your cover crop, sort of terminating it effectively, and lays it down at the same time. They started in the States with all you know, sort of what was the pre-runner of sort of regen agriculture type stuff. I suppose the advantage is you can, you know, it acts like a living mulch really, but you don't have to, you know, go out and spend a fancy load of money, because they're not particularly cheap, those things. Obviously, you know, they'll last you a lifetime, and then we do make them in the UK now, so you can get them here. But you can achieve a similar thing with 2 people and a board and 2 bits of string. Obviously, it's a bit more labor intensive, but you can get there. Or the other way of using cover crops, sort of more towards the top, there, those pictures. So you've grown your cover crop, you're smashing it up with some kind of, with a rotavator or some way of sort of desiccating it and chewing it up, and then doing what's already been described, just that sort of strip tillage. So the idea being that you're only disturbing the bit down the middle where you're planting, but then between your rows, then the mulch is going to sit there and act as a weed suppressant. So on the picture on the right there is the same crop, just later on in the season. So yeah, they're all potential options. I'm trying to think of some of the good. I mean, you've got things like the sort of the classic red clover. I mean, you can buy a lot of cover crop mixes. Vetches, quite good. And they sort of, with the vetches, you know, they sort of desiccate themselves naturally when you get the first frosts anyway. So they can be quite good for things you're going to sow later through the season. Yeah, there's lots of different options. I don't know, has anyone got any sort of experience in this area?
Yeah, we had a whole field of vetch a couple of years ago, and we took a forage crop off it. It was about 15 acres of vetch basically, and the forage was quite good, but we had an awful problem with cooch the following year. I think there must have been cooch had got in there or something, and that was probably the hardest year we've ever had growing veg, following off from the vetch lay. Maybe we didn't do it right, but if we were going to go and do it again, I probably wouldn't do it again. I would just stick to clover, which is what we normally do. We always find that clover is probably the best thing, to be honest.
Yeah, because the cooch has got is it the underground shoots, isn't it? Is it the stolons or whatever they call it? And
rhizomes.
Rhizomes, yeah. And it comes from seed as well.
Yeah, it's a nightmare for us sometimes. We get on top of it. We just basically just cultivate the hell out of it, basically.
That's the way, isn't it? Keep moving it and let it dry on the top.
It's the one weed that really dispirits me. And it just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back.
Yeah, I find that even fat hen and all the other weeds we can kind of just about get on top of them, but once you get grasses in there, then you've got problems.
Yeah, I think the system is, if you've got cooch, you need to have like a cultivating fallow period where you go after something like cooch and maybe creeping thistle. Every time you see it, you go through and cultivate it with some sort of uplifting tine that leaves the weed on the top, and hopefully you do it just before a dry spell, so it just dries up naturally. I mean, that's how all the land was cleared like that, because you know all the land basically they grow vegetables on was cleared pre-roundup, you know, by cultivation.
Yeah,
where
we got
on top of. Sorry.
Yeah, we got rid of it on one patch we had infested in the field, and that was due to our contractor telling me that that's why the rotavator was invented for. And we cultivated this patch 5 times. Whenever the cooch was starting to peep up, we take the rotavator in, and what it does, it exhausts it and it dies.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we do.
Yeah, go along with that.
I know
Gerald.
It's against the principle of, but there are times when you've got to break the principle on which of the both evils you want to live with.
Yeah, I agree. But you know, rotavating gives soil structure a bit of a hiding. But if you don't get rid of it, you're never going to be able to grow a crop on it. So you know.
And I think I was surprised how it it cleaned up totally. I didn't believe it, to be honest. And just see it when it was starting to come up about 2 or 3 inches, I was phoning the contractor and he was belting the hell out of it.
Well, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen some pasture ploughed up, and underneath the pasture was a ruck of couch grass, and they just went through it more or less every 3 weeks with the old-fashioned triple K springtime cultivator, and it fetched it all up to the top. In fact, they made piles of it on the headlands, and then after 3 or 4 pastures, it was diminishing very, very rapidly.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, go on to sort of what largely things have been discussed before, but the sort of mulching membranes. So you've got sort of 2 ways of doing it. Effectively, you can use the mulching films, which luckily most of them are now biodegradable, not all of them, but a lot of them are sort of cornstarch, potato starch. The only drawback is they are sort of generally single use. They tend to cost in the region. I mean, obviously, you know, you probably get more discount for more bulk as bought, but around 35 pence a meter squared, something in that sort of area. And yeah, it does, you know, well, both types of mulches, you know, they'll warm the soil a bit earlier for you, and you know, they're brilliant weed control. You can get the ones where they've cut them out for you, so whatever your optimal density is, you can use them. But I suppose they do tend to work a bit better in sort of bed systems than, you know, sort of more general kind of open field, or, you know, if it's a not bed system you're growing in. And then the polythene mulches, which have been talked about, they're not biodegradable, but then they do last, you know, they'll last a decade potentially before the UV degrade gets them, and they are reusable. As was said with the onions, people do them. Celery, I've seen them done where they've just effectively had a sheet either side, and then you just sort of you pull it out afterwards using a tractor or what have you, or you can do it by hand, and they typically can be a similar price or slightly more expensive than one of the biomulches. But it sounds like everyone's already got good experience of using these.
Yeah. Have you tried paper rolls? The Dutch use a paper roll. It's a waxed,
okay.
and that's biodegradable. I rather that than plastic.
That's interesting. I've not heard of that.
Okay, there is. It's the same size, same rolls. You can use the same applicator. We tried it once, one roll, and it's expensive, but it's organic. It's better.
That's good. Yeah, thanks for that, Gerald. I see mulching films either on very, very large farms where they use it for things like pumpkins and courgettes, and they've got kit that'll actually drill into it, or on very small farms where you can make holes and plant by hand. So it's a sort of defines horticulture really. But I've seen machines doing 3 rows of biodegradable and putting sweet corn or courgettes into it and going along faster than you can keep up with it.
Okay, then going on to the mulches in organic material. I mean, Chris will probably talk about the first one. That was a bit of work that he did. Do you want to say something more about that?
Yeah, this was some work we did in Monmouth on an organic farm. Got their own farm shop, and they were interested in looking at composted wood chip, and we got a little bit of funding off Mentor Business, and we applied the mulch. You can see there they got a load, or we got the mulch from one phone call to the first tree surgeon that was on the list in the Monmouth area, and he brought mulch the day after, and he's been bringing it ever since. And it worked out really well. You know, we put it on purple sprouting, PSB, purple sprout broccoli and celeriac, both sort of steady growing crops. It's in the ground for a long time. And then we also did a lot of hand hoeing time to just see what sort of the rough costs of hoeing. And, you know, to hand hoe a purple sprouting cross was, well, it says there, £262 a hectare. And I wouldn't say I'm the fastest hoer, but, you know, I'm pretty competent at it. And then it was easy to apply from, you know, getting it in the load or bucket and just sort of gradually tilting it out as we went. So, you know, you can semi-mechanize it anyway. If you put wood chip on the surfaces of mulch, it doesn't sort of steal the nitrogen like it does if you incorporate it.
I think it's getting harder to find wood chip because so many people are using it for biofuel. The tree surgeons can get lots of money for it. That's my experience. And I also think it's better if the wood chip is perhaps a year old, so it's decomposed just a little bit.
Yeah, it's certainly.
I have put fresh wood chip on, and it's all disappeared now. But I just wonder if it's better if it's just a little bit older.
Yeah, I think you're right. If it's a bit compost, this that you can see there, that was pretty. It was from the yard of this tree surgeon. It was you know, it was like full of mushrooms and stuff. It was really full of biological action. I've also worked with a no-dig farm down at Brynhammon, and he does a recycled sort of green waste bed with a wood chip path, and that is a really good system. But yeah, I mean, you're right, Ali. It's, you know, it is being sort of dried out for biofuels. Yeah, but some, you know, some tree surgeons, they don't want to go back to the depot. If your farm's between them and the depot, between the job and the depot, they're keen to drop it off.
Yeah.
Get on the phone, in other words. But yeah, it's good material, and it's certainly very good at keeping weeds down. The chap at Brynhammon commented that it was a big attractant to moles, but that was because wherever we put the wood chip down, we got like 1 million worms.
I've got a sort of question or point to make here.
Yeah.
As I again said earlier, we're relatively new, but last summer we got two. You know, they're quite small patches. They are about 40 meters squared each in a churchyard, and I came up with the idea that we cut the turf out, which was because it was just lawn previously. Cut the turf out, build up walls around it about 1 foot high, and then we got the local authority who had already volunteered compost free to fill them up, so we had a raised bed instantly, about 1 foot deep. But the compost they brought is the local authority, people call it local authority compost, from the green waste that they collect from people's from the roadsides, you know, from people's households. Or, you know, the weekly rubbish collections, and they compost it down relatively locally, about 5 miles from where we are. And well, one of the beds took eight tons, which was 8 truckloads coming to us with the compost. Anybody got any experience of local authority compost?
Yeah, well, that chap at Brynhammon, he was getting it from down that way. You know, it was a council thing. It was this PAS 100 spec, which means it hasn't got any plastic in it, or hardly any. And he was getting it delivered. It was quite expensive, but he was getting it delivered. But if you can get it for free, even better. But every council seems to have a different approach to what they do with the green waste compost.
Yeah.
Right. The only issue I've had with it so far is that I was somewhat surprised when I took it. I didn't ask what its pH was, and so I measured it myself, and it was about 11.
Yeah, 11's pretty keen, but yeah, I've seen it well over 7.
Yeah.
When we first started, we had 100. When we first started 10 years ago, we had about 100 tons of it for our area.
Wow.
But it was full of the first lot we got, and it was over 2 years. But the first lot we got of it was full of plastic.
Yeah.
And knives and forks and cutlery of all sorts, and bottle tops. because people drop them in their compost bin, and then they give it to the council, and it goes through the processing, and we are still 10 years on pulling plastic out of the
Oh God.
So I'll just be warned. I think they've got better at sieving it now, haven't they, Chris?
Yeah, you've got to go for PAS 100 because
Yeah, this was PAS 100, but it's
yeah, I know, but I mean they've got it now, so it's a bit more audited. But
yeah.
if it's PAS 100, it shouldn't have any notable quantity of plastic in it, but it is a nightmare if you do get plastic in it. It's also if it's composted properly, because they got windrows and stuff, and they turn it when it gets to 50, 60 centigrade, so there's no weed in it.
That's right.
You've got to be careful with these amounts of organic you're putting on, because you're starting to get towards polluting levels of nutrients coming out of it. So you just got to make sure that you know what the nitrogen and phosphate contents of it are, and if you're putting on huge amounts, you could be doing a fair bit of damage.
Yeah. But this was 10 years ago. It was when we first started. We don't use that anymore. We don't get it anymore.
Yeah, and then I suppose there's the more traditional putting the cardboard underneath your compost, wherever you're getting it from, making it yourself, getting it from the local municipal place. And yeah, I guess it's another one of those things that once you've set it up, it doesn't need a huge amount of maintenance, as a lot of you'll probably know. You just add a little bit every now and again, and yeah, as long as you're keeping on top of the weeds blowing in, they generally work fairly well. I guess people have got a fair bit of experience with that.
Got a few cardboard enthusiasts I've seen in Wales. I'm not particularly keen myself, because you're not really sure what's in the ink and that, but it is done. I think you're right to mention Mypex, and I mean Mypex you can put down almost as like a burn off treatment to burn your weeds off, and then when you come to make the beds up, just take it off and roll it up.
But it's surprising how quick the cardboard does disappear.
Is it?
Within a couple of months, it helps if you've got like a very small quite long pointy stick, a dibber that you can use to sort of make your hole and check that you've gone through the cardboard, so that when you're putting your plug in, that the root's definitely getting down through that layer. But it doesn't take long.
Yeah.
It's a good idea if you do use cardboard to wet it as well, I think. But we don't use it. We just trim down the grass really low and put the compost on top of that.
Yeah.
Cardboard.
No dig.
So then moving on back on to sort of general broadacre, we've got it there, although they're not cheap. There are now quite a number of autonomous, robotic, whatever term you'd like to use, options out there in the marketplace. They generally tend to focus on one of two systems, apart from this one. But so, for example, this Farm Droid system, they use GPS, so they know within a 2 millimeters or whatever it is where every seed has been dropped, so they can then, when they're coming back in, it's GPS guided as well. So then you're getting your cultivated tines are coming up, millimeter accuracy all the time. And being autonomous, you can just keep sending it out and out and again. Some people do even swap the batteries so that you can get the things running. So they'll stick a new set of batteries on it, at sort of 11 o'clock at night, and then come out at 6 o'clock in the morning and put another charge set on. So it keeps itself going all the way through the long period in the day. And a lot of organic producers and even large scale conventional farms are getting a lot of luck with that, particularly things like that aren't very well canopy forming. So your leeks and your onions they're getting a lot of success. There's other types of robotic weeders which use camera mounted systems. So you do get, you know, it's sort of, it's going in and out as it's going along the road. So you're getting that interplant, inter-row cultivation. And then some are more on the sort of spot treatment of chemicals. So you're getting a much more, you've got cameras on the front, which effectively divides everything in front of the machine into sort of effectively tiny little postage stamps, and the camera decides, is it weed, is it ground, or is it crop, and then you end up with that sort of precision application of your product, which means in theory you can use, you know, very broad spectrum products like Roundup until much later after your crop has developed, because you have a very high able to know precision accuracy in able to decide, you know, you're just getting it onto the crop. So yeah, that's, I don't know if anyone has heard anything more about these sorts of developments. Okay, doke.
Robinson.
Sorry, this slide.
No, the previous slide. They all look a bit Heath Robinson, don't they?
They do.
I want one though.
I mean,
you
can easily rig up a bit of kit that will go through and hoe out, you know, but just based on the old tine cultivators. And, you know, we do that a lot in pumpkins. Most pumpkin farms would have some sort of device they can drag behind a tractor and weed out the rows. And we also find a great benefit from cultivating down the track, because it sort of opens up the soil structure. So, you know, they're sometimes hoed even if there's no weed in them. Thanks, Gerald.
Yeah, I guess that kind of brings on to the next, the mechanical side of things. So yeah, you can sort of, you know, make it crop specific with your row widths and whatever the plant sizes and spacing and what have you. So you go in either sort of inter row or between the rows. So yeah, so basically you there are options to be pulled behind the tractor, as just been said, or there are in fact very simple tine cultivators that you can use that can just pull behind a person, as you can see in the bottom plot there. So yeah, they all sort of exist, and some of the more advanced systems, that the Garfords, which is in front of the red tractor in the middle there, they do have a camera system, and it's sort of effectively on a pivot, and they just work out when is the best time to spin that motor, and you end up getting cultivation within the row as well as between the rows. So I don't know, does anyone use any of this type of equipment?
No.
So again, another kind of equipment which is a possibility is the electrical weeding. Again, these things aren't terribly cheap, but you've got a few options. You've got front mounted box, back mounted boxes, very imaginatively named, and then you've got these sort of electrode style ones with the sort of folding arms, used, becoming more common in sort of bush fruit and canes. And here's just some example of sort of how well it works in practice. It's useful in conventional systems with sort of loss of herbicide and restrictions and herbicide resistance, and the threat of sort of glyphosate loss potentially, and also it's good, you know, in terms of that's the way sustainable farming incentives are going at the minute. And you know, with the loss of basic payment and what have you, they're trying to encourage all this kind of stuff. Hand weeding obviously can be a bit slow and potentially expensive, and you don't have to disturb the soil with electric weeding, and you don't kill, well, they claim you potentially don't kill pests, pests unless you want to, or unless there's direct contact. So yeah, I don't know, well, just before we go on to the next slide, does don't want any more comments on that sort of side of things. No, okay, just quickly whiz you through. So just to make everyone aware, we have just started, it's a big European project, this Operate project, and it's specifically focusing on promoting non-chemical weed control methods. So we're sort of essentially building networks in the countries. The idea is we want to establish sort of a national network through grassroots groups who identify all the barriers. We're sort of then shortlisting inventories of solutions, which we then want to sort of scale up through cross-fertilization with people that are supplying the equipment, and help sort of then communicate, disseminate, and sort of lots of demonstrations of this stuff. So we're planning over the next 3 years to have lots of demonstrations all across the UK. And we've also, got social media channels and things, and we're going to be, providing lots of information coming out. So just a bit of a higher level, more understanding. There's also the other part to the project that we're going to be feeding essentially into sort of the national policy debates, and we're looking for people to help set up the UK network. So everything from growers, across the spectrum of stakeholders, to people to contribute to what we're doing. So yeah, if anyone is interested, we'd love to hear from you. We do have some questionnaires that we're asking growers to fill out at the minute, to try and serve people like yourselves to try and understand, what your key problems and challenges are, so that we can sort of shape the project to to be as beneficial to as many people as possible. Oh, sorry, I just realized I didn't put Chris's email down. But I think, yeah, if you would like to contact us about the Operate project, either of us, we'd love to hear from you. And I think Chris's details, are accessible through Tuffy, I suppose?
Yep, just send us an email and we can pass the details on. Lovely.
So yeah, thank you.
Just a question. Washwater offer something called weed wipers. Do you have any experience of what the offering is and how it's used? I think it's to reduce chemical weed killers, isn't it?
Yeah, so the idea is if you've got two, it works very well. I've seen it and experience using it more in grassland, but there's no reason, and blackgrass as well. So if you've got your weed, which is growing above your crop, effectively you can go along with, it's sort of like a long cylindrical tube, effectively. Sometimes it has bristles on it, sometimes it has, it's made of carpet, and you effectively have a spot sprayer which applies often glyphosate to the roller, and then that goes along. So if you've got your grassland and your blackgrass or whatever it happens to be that's growing up, your rushes or what have you, higher, and then you come along and you just sort of paint the chemical onto the top. Only thing I could say practically about that is some are designed with the wheels on the side of your sort of cylindrical barrel. Some have them on at the behind. Definitely, if you have a choice, go for them on the side, because what happens is if there's a bit of chemical residue left on the plant and your wheels are behind, you then roll, you've just painted it on the plant, and then the wheels pick it up from the plant that they then roll over, and you end up with burn streaks in your crop. So if you're going to get a weed wiper, make sure the wheels are not behind.
Yeah. And just the other thing, we use a hoe to go in between the plants as well, so manually. Is a wheel hoe any use? Is it something that we should look into?
I'm trying to think what you mean exactly.
I've heard of kind of a wheel hoe where you kind of wheel it along and it takes up the weeds, apparently.
Yeah, they're good in the pathways, and then you just have to hoe down row, because they go about 15-20 times as fast as a hand hoe. So you just basically have a wheel and a blade, and depending how steady you are, you can get quite near the crop, and then it just gives you a sort of an inch wide strip, 25mm strip, instead of having to hoe the whole field.
Okay.
You can get sort of versions that follow a tractor as well, the old-fashioned steerage hose.
Okay, I'll have a look at that. Thank you.
Today, tomorrow.
Oh, it's today.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions?
It's switching it on and off. It's been starting, so we don't want to change these expensive pipes.
Yep, lovely. There you go. If you have any questions after that you come up with, email us or email Chris and Ben directly. Next week we have another webinar. It's nutrient use efficiency in field vegetables with Chris and Lizzie Sagu. If you want to sign up, it's on our website. I'll pop the link in the chat as well. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.